Welcome to Beaudesert. The story of Beaudesert begins in Mudgee in New South Wales at a property called Beaudesert. So, how did the name get from there to here? In this video, we'll explore the name and the history of this town.
Beaudesert at Mudgee was established by a guy called Henry Bailey in 1835. Bailey was a descendant of the Paget family who held Beaudesert Park as a family estate in Staffordshire in England. The estate was given to the Paget family by King Henry VIII.
There'll be a little bit of extra information about Beaudesert in England at the end of this documentary.
In 1842, the Moreton Bay Penal Settlement was closed. Word got out and squatters from western areas of Sydney started to move north to claim land as quickly as possible, heading for these enticing and potentially lucrative northern lands. Enter Edwin Hawkins. He was a farm manager who worked for Henry Bailey at Beaudesert at Mudgee. Sometime later, he was a pastoral overseer for Henry Sutton of Bathurst. Henry Sutton employed Hawkins to take his sheep north to the largely unexplored region of the Logan. Hawkins did just that and combined his sheep with Sutton's and set off. Hawkins arrived at the Logan in 1842 and established a 50,000-acre stock run on the Logan River and named it after Beaudesert at Mudgee. His hut was the first European structure in the area.
In 1829, Henry Bailey returned to England for a little while, primarily to settle his little brother Nicholas Paget into school. Now that's what I call a long school run. That same year, in the year 1842, a fellow by the name of Hugh Aikman got the first squatting licence here in this area. His land is just over here. Originally this was known as Bungrupen, the Indigenous word for place of parrots. And the reason why it was known as a place of parrots was because just over there is the Ilbogan Lagoon. Sometime later, Aikman's property changed its name to Bromelton, and from Bromelton we get Bromelton. And Bromelton House, at least the modern successor, is just beyond those trees, over that way.
And now for the third house. Paul and Clement Lawless set up the Ninduanbar pastoral run, also in 1842. They sold the land to Alfred William Compain in 1847. Alfred was a founding member of the Queensland Legislative Council, and he built much of the existing Ninduanbar house.
So as the plaque there says, the old Beaudesert homestead was built adjacent to that memorial, which would put the house just over there, where the bowls club is.
A bit later, it became the receiving place for the mail. By 1845, the Beaudesert run was managed by William Duckett White. Later, Duckett became one of the largest landholders in the district. One of his landholdings became the town of Southport, and he played a significant role in the development of Beenleigh.
So these were the first three European homes to be established in this area: Beaudesert, Bromelton and Ninduanbar. But what was going on in this area before the arrival of Europeans? Much of the Beaudesert area was covered by hoop pines. Now, hoop pines were actually the very first export from Brisbane to England. And the reason why they were so popular is because the hoop pine has such a long, tall, straight, sturdy trunk. Incredible to imagine that so much of this area was covered by hoop pines. Here at the racecourse just outside of town, there once existed a bora ring. Rainbow Serpent Sculpture 2008 here at Ilbogan Park. It's lovely. And just over here is the Logan River. Sandbars right in the middle of it. Well, the Logan River, it certainly travels a long way. Just next to Bromelton House is the Ilbogan Lagoon. And according to the local Indigenous people, it was the home of a bunyip, a strange duck-billed serpent-like creature. The Indigenous people were so wary of this bunyip that they always refused to swim in the lagoon. But in 1880, a European woman living here at Bromelton House reported seeing the bunyip, and she of course was terrified of it as well. The lagoon itself is very deep. In some parts it's 90 feet deep.
In 1863, cotton was grown with the help of indentured South Sea Islander workers. 1863 was also the start of the Postal Service coach run. On this 1865 map, you can see that Beaudesert is now written as one word. And then in 1871, the first Cobb & Co coach service began its run to Beaudesert.
In 1872, the Beaudesert station was being subdivided for more intensive development, with a way away from grazing and towards agriculture. And the reason for that was because the government at the time needed the land to be more productive. You couldn't just have one huge run owning all this land. You had to divide it up and get more farms happening.
In 1874, the town was laid out as a grid pattern, and the first sale of blocks occurred. This marks the beginning of the town.
In 1879, the Tabragalba Divisional Board was created, with Beaudesert as its capital. The Logan and Albert Hotel, this was built in 1879. It burnt down in the early 1930s, but was rebuilt in 1934. Unfortunately, it's closed now. Such a historic building right in the centre of town, and it's out of business. What a shame. I'm walking along Sandy Creek Road, and just to my right I've come upon the memorial plaque for the Bromelton Provisional School. This was the site of where it used to be, and it says it was here from 1880 to 1953. It's actually rather appropriate here because there's some rubbish on the ground which was not good. But a lot of the rubbish are these little icy pole things, these ice block things that kids love. So it's rather fitting that kind of rubbish would be right outside of school. And there's all sorts of other rubbish too. Looks like the kids were drinking beer. Beaudesert Hotel. It was built in 1885. This is what it looked like back in the day. It burnt down in 1940, and this is its replacement. It was in 1885 that land was purchased for a future Catholic church. And it was also in that year that the presbytery was built. That's where the priest lives, and that's right over there.
In 1885, Enright's store was opened by Michael Enright and B.J. McGee. Michael was an Irishman who arrived in Australia in 1882.
Across the road there is the Railway Hotel. However, that's not the original Railway Hotel. The first one was built just next door, where the Woolworths car park is. It opened in 1887, 1 year before the railway line arrived here. It was eventually pulled down and the new hotel was built in 2007. But as a train station, the railway line arrived here in 1888. The line begins up at Bethania train station. Actually, back then it was known as Bethania Junction. I made a video about the suburb of Bethania. But here it came, the railway line, right down here. And there's some of the tracks, they're still there. You see that? Old train tracks. That's the station master's house. What a beautiful old building. Lovely. Now it's Rotary Club of Beaudesert.
In 1888, the Leys sawmill was opened. It burnt down in 1919.
It was in 1889 that the Beaudesert homestead was demolished. It had been abandoned for some time. In 1889, the first St Mary's Church was opened here. It was blessed by the Archbishop, However, it was rain no play on that day. The whole event had to be cancelled because of heavy rain and flooding.
In 1898, Enright's store was destroyed by fire.
The agricultural showgrounds. The first show was held here in 1889. Taking a little look around Beaudesert Cemetery, and I read somewhere that this cemetery got started in about 1900 or 1901, which doesn't make it a very old cemetery. However, there's a grave over here, and this fellow here died, Robert Alexander Boyd, in 1891. So clearly burials were happening here before 1900. And down at the lower end of the cemetery here is a monument to William Drumley. He was an Indigenous man, highly regarded by his people and by the European settlers last century and into this century as well. He was the fellow who would walk from Beaudesert to Southport over Tambourine Mountain. And he did this walk, I think was every year or so, to check on his sister and her kids to make sure that they were, well, certainly the kids were behaving themselves and living good, proper lives and you know, obeying their parents and that sort of thing. And he did this walk up until his 80s, I think, really. And some years ago, maybe 10, 12 years ago, some people recreated the walk. They did it over 3 days. But Drumley, he used to do it in 1 day, even when he was in his 80s. Good heavens, look at this one. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought it was a little swimming pool. That is someone's grave. Swimming pool blue.
The year is 1903, and in this year the Tabragalba Divisional Board became the Shire of Beaudesert.
And the Shire of Beaudesert was absolutely enormous. It extended almost all the way to Beenleigh. I'm currently standing in Bars Scrub on Tarwonga Road, and it went all the way south to the New South Wales border. Here it is on a map. I'll show you how big the place was. Oh, I just tore it. There we go. See that? Beenleigh's up here. New South Wales is down there. So that's Beenleigh just there, and I'm standing right about here.
The Grand Hotel was built in 1903. The hotel was built by the Ward family, entirely from timber cut from their own property at Kerry. It burnt down in 1963. In 1903, the Beaudesert Shire Tramway opened to Christmas Creek, Lamington and Rathdowney. It transported timber, dairy produce and livestock to the Beaudesert railhead.
And right where I'm standing is where the tramway used to come from. It was over there, across the road here, and off that way, past those modern buildings. But across the road there is something called the Beaudesert Markets. Here's an example of it right here. I guess a truck would have backed up to this spot here and the cattle moving up through here onto the truck and then being driven away. Is this still being used? It doesn't look like it's been used for a little while, but it's still in immaculate condition. It's as if everyone just left yesterday. You know, it would make a great petting zoo. Where the KFC is now, back in 1904, that was the site of the Logan and Albert Cooperative Butter Factory. And it looked just like the Kingston Butter Factory. It must have been the same architect. So it was here on the site where the KFC is and the Super Cheap. It closed in 1987 and was demolished some years later. And then in 1907, a new St Mary's Church was built. And that's it right there behind me. It is still today the largest timber Gothic church in Australia. And when it was first opened, it had a very dark paint colour to it, which I thought was rather attractive. And just between you and me, I couldn't actually get permission to get inside the church. They were happy for me to come in, but we couldn't seem to settle on a day and a time for that to happen. I'm standing out in the car park now, and the doors are enticingly open. And me being the biggest busybody there is, I just have to go and have a look. Okay, I'll make my escape.
In 1921, 5 large double-fronted shops in William Street also burnt down.
Unveiled in 1921.
In 1927, the Duke and Duchess of York arrived for a visit in Beaudesert as part of their Australian tour. The Duke became King George VI 10 years later.
By the 1920s, the Beaudesert Agricultural Show was very, very popular, including the sideshow attractions. These included the Fat Lady, the half-man, half-woman, performing monkeys, telepaths, the Great Whirl of Death, Zimmy, the world's wonder eater and smoker, and Afrikaner Dave, African pygmies. Well, that's quite a lineup. And glamorous balls were very popular here back in the 1910s, 20s and 30s, although this one in particular looks like the end of the film The Shining.
In 1948, the movie The Sons of Matthew was filmed in and around the Beaudesert region. Directed by Charles Chauvel, it was a ghastly melodrama of frontier life, as the heroes battled the elements and horrendous haircuts. The interior scenes were shot in a studio in Sydney, and while there, director Chauvel's house was robbed. It is a shame the thieves didn't steal the film negatives.
This is Hereford Street. Back in the day, the cattle were offloaded from the trains, herded along this road here, down onto Hopkins Street, onto the main road. They'd hang a right and then be herded up to the abattoir. Here's a photo taken of such an event a little bit further down, but on the main road. Just come off Hereford and a little detour here. The tramway used to come right along there. I don't know if you can see it. There's a little fence just out there, about there. Well, I did that well. Tramway went that way. Oh, this is all muddy. Yeah, I don't want to walk in there. No, that's all muddy. Anyway, take my word for it. The tramway was just over there. And then the cattle would end up along Sandy Creek Road, past the old Brommelton Provisional School, and down here they'd be herded through this way and up there to Tancred's Abattoir, and that opened in 1952. The train station was shut down for passenger service in 1961. However, the line remained open for the local dairy farmers and abattoir to get their produce out. The line was eventually shut down in 1996 with the closure of Tancred's Abattoir. And you can see very clearly where the railway line used to come through here. Wow. It's kind of a shame the train line isn't still here. I think it'd be very handy for the people living in Beaudesert to get back up into Brisbane or down to the Gold Coast. Quack.
Tell me that no wonder my parents left me there.
It's just that if you got it wrong, you got bashed. And then because you got bashed, you didn't want to stick around, so you'd run away. Then they'd bring you back and they'd bash you again.
Not only did he knock my teeth out, he split the back of my head open. None of the De La Salle brothers ended up coming down to help me.
Punched out by grown men and stuff like that, you know.
Boys Town Beaudesert has been said to be the most horrific case of systematic and mass child abuse ever to be uncovered in Australia. By 2017, the trustees for the De La Salle brothers reportedly paid out almost $27 million in response to 219 credible abuse claims, the highest number against any church institution in Australia, and what one judge called a gulag right in our midst.
A prison camp, basically.
1962 saw the opening of this building. It was the administration building for the Shire of Beaudesert. Today it still serves the same function, though today it's the council building for the Scenic Rim Regional Council. There is a very interesting and informative plaque just on the wall here outside of the council building. Unfortunately, it's several metres from the footpath and I can't quite read it. I knew I should have brought my binoculars. No visit to Beaudesert would be complete without a stop off at the Historical Museum. This is an actual train wagon from the Beaudesert Tramway. Wow. We need to fix this little red wagon.
In 2007, the Shire of Beaudesert was abolished, with the northern half becoming part of the City of Logan, and the rest becoming part of the Scenic Rim Regional Council.
And it was in 2013 that the St Mary's Catholic School was severely damaged by fire. And it just so happens that next year in 2024 it'll be the 150th anniversary of Beaudesert. Should be a great party. Thanks very much for watching the video. I hope you liked it. If you did, please consider subscribing to my channel.